Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's episode, well, guys, it's time to talk about Remco Evenepoel because we see in the news the huge transfer that Remco Evenepoel is going to be leaving Pseudo Quick-Step and going over to Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe. That is massive, but there's a lot of complications in it. Now, when you start looking at some of the press, they're just talking about Remco going over to Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe, and he has this huge support staff over there of Primoz Roglic, Lipovitz, whose contract is up or not up. I think he's still staying, is what it seems to be the gossip anyways. So we know Roglic is staying, Lipovitz stays, and we keep all the other hitters like Danny Martinez there, Jai Henley's there. We start talking about Vlasov having some good performances. Pellizzari went really well in the Giro d'Italia this season, so you know he's a great support rider when we're talking about going up into the deep mountains. And if you look over at Pseudo Quick-Step, Remco Evenepoel's current team at the 2025 season, well, he didn't have a whole lot of support. There was Mikel Landa, of course, that crashed on stage 1 of the 25 Giro d'Italia that couldn't make it then, of course, to the Tour de France. So Remco Evenepoel was left without his number one super domestique, the Spaniard there from the Basque Country, Mikel Landa. So with that in mind, though, when you look over at Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe, there's still some questions to be asked. And when I first start looking at it, I can't guarantee you that Remco Evenepoel's coming over there and that's his team, okay? I look at it as he's coming over and Primoz Roglic and Remco Evenepoel will have to play nice. That's the number one first page problem right here for Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe. Can Primoz Roglic and Remco Evenepoel play nice? If I take you into the 23 Vuelta a España, where Sepp Kuss was the second American winner of the Vuelta a España, that year, we don't forget that one, right? In 2023, Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard did not play nice with their teammate Sepp Kuss. And we know that after the 23 season, Jumbo-Visma then, now Visma Lease Bike now, we know they got rid of Primoz Roglic. Now, was it just because he couldn't play nice? If I look at those details of the 23 Vuelta a España where they were attacking Sepp Kuss, I got to believe that it was first started from Jonas Vingegaard going up there and stealing some stage victories and jumping over Primoz Roglic. And then Roglic is thinking, well, if you're going to let Jonas Vingegaard go up the road, why can't I go up the road and try to win the Vuelta a España too? Because it would be nice to win my fourth Vuelta victory at that 23 edition. Now, he's got 4 now, but he only had 3 then, and 4 was important in 2023. But I believe all that chaos was started from Jonas Vingegaard attacking and then Primoz Roglic going, hey, I'm jumping all in. That being said, we look at the 25 season here at the Tour de France and you look at Lipovitz, who went 3rd on the general classification, Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe, and you start thinking about some of the stages like stages 18 where we saw, of course, Ben O'Connor win that stage. When Jonas Vingegaard attacked from Visma Lease Bike and he went up the road with Jorgensen pulling him along with Tadej Pogačar, it was Lipovitz back there at the top of the final descent before they went into the final climb. That was 30 seconds behind, but it was Primoz Roglic that was in that front group sitting 5th on general classification. Did he drop back for Lipovitz? That's 3rd and wearing the white leaders jersey at the Tour de France? He did not, but then he did take a nature break at the bottom of that climb when Ben O'Connor lit everybody up. And of course he had some company when Jorgensen went, and he had Rubio up there too, while Primoz Roglic decided it was a good time to take a nature break at that moment. So when we start looking at some of the problems of bringing Remco Evenepoel over to BORA Hansgrohe, the biggest one that I see, page 1 problem, is can Primoz Roglic and Remco Evenepoel play nice? Now, when I was racing for Team Saturn, we had 3 of us that were dominating domestically here in the U.S. It was myself, Tom Danielson, and Nathan O'Neill. And right away, beginning of training camp, when everyone was starting to ride on form, I talked to both those riders and said, hey, there's no way we can be racing against each other. Remember, BORA Hansgrohe over in the European Peloton, they have 3 different races going on at the same weekend. So you can separate Remco Evenepoel and Primoz Roglic throughout most of the season, but you got to believe that when it comes to July at the Tour de France, you got to bring those 2 together. So unlike myself with Team Saturn, when I'm having that conversation with my teammates of Danielson and Nathan O'Neill, where I'm saying we have to play nice, we're going to have to share victories. So we'll pick different victories that you want. If you want this one, you can take that. I preferred in that season in 2003 that I wanted to win the Redlands Bicycle Classic, and I spoke with those 2 guys and I said, look, this is the one I want to win. Everything else you guys can pick and have your picks at. I just want Redlands because It's in my backyard. I grew up in San Diego, California, and Redlands is only an hour and a half from my backyard there of San Diego, California. So I certainly wanted to win Redlands, but we had to share throughout the whole year. So can these two play nice? Now, if we stay on that play nice activity, if we think about it and you can get them to play nice, if I'm the director sportif over there at BORA Hansgrohe, I'm saying that I'll race these guys all together, both of them, and I'll race a superstar studded team at all of the biggest races there in Europe. If you think about it, these two have to play nice, and if they do, and they can learn to share victories, then when you get into July, it starts setting up a different kind of chemistry in the team where they automatically know that if they can trust each other, can Remco Evenepoel trust Primoz Roglic? Can Primoz Roglic trust Remco Evenepoel? Now, I don't have much disbelief that Remco Evenepoel will not play nice with Primoz Roglic, because I have seen the Belgian wonder kid play nice with his other teammates and help his teammates out by doing magnificent pulls on the front for them time and time again. So I don't have any question marks around Remco Evenepoel. The question mark is, can Primoz Roglic play nice with Remco? So I'm the director sportif, will sit in that seat for a moment, and I say, you two guys are going to race the whole season together. I don't feel the need to split them up. I would bring them in as a superstar studded team all together. Why weaken the team at all? Go in everywhere and plan to win. Go into the one-day classics and battle against Tadej Pogacar, because if there's any point in time where having some massive amount of power would help you the most, it's at the one-day races. We know Tadej Pogacar is the best rider in the world, and it doesn't matter if you have a stronger team than Tadej Pogacar, you still have to go one-on-one against Tadej Pogacar unless you have a teammate like Primoz Roglic that's backing you up, or a teammate like Remco Evenepoel that's backing up Primoz Roglic. At that point in time, when you start seeing Liège-Bastogne-Liège, for example, and Tadej Pogacar is attacking up La Redoute, well, that's 30-plus kilometers away from the finish. So if you have a Primoz Roglic and a Remco Evenepoel that are teammates back there, and they race tactically smart, these are type of races that you stand a chance of beating a Tadej Pogacar, assuming both these riders on top form, and assuming some of their super domestiques back there are riding good too. So my mind first, can they play nice? Now we go into second. Let's go into the DS, so the director sportifs, how they work. Well, first off, we look over at Soudal Quickstep, and I take you back to that 23 Vuelta a España, stage 6. Sepp Kuss goes up the road, and Soudal Quickstep made the knucklehead tactic of letting Sepp Kuss go up the road on stage 6. Now, Remco Evenepoel thought that year of the 23 Vuelta a España that, okay, I can gain time back on Sepp Kuss, so I don't have to worry about it. What he didn't calculate for is that Sepp Kuss rode for then Jumbo-Visma, now Visma-Lease bike, and his teammates were Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard. So if you're going to allow Sepp Kuss, one of the best climbers in the world, and especially the best climber at the Vuelta a España early in that 23 Vuelta, if you're going to let him go up the road, not only do you have to drop him, but now you have Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard sitting on your wheel. So Remco Evenepoel's director sportif on that stage 6, it was knucklehead tactics of extreme proportion. I mean, extremely bad tactics. Now you jump from Soudal Quickstep over to BORA Hansgrohe. Well, I can tell you some of the mistakes over at BORA Hansgrohe I've made. It has been numerous over there, but I can take you in to the 24 Vuelta a España, and I can take you into stage 6 where Ben O'Connor won. At that year's edition, when Ben O'Connor went up the road, the BORA Hansgrohe director sportif thought that other teams should help pull that back. Other teams are responsible for pulling Primoz Roglic and helping BORA Hansgrohe win the Vuelta a España in 2024? I don't think so. There is no excuse for not pulling that break back that had Ben O'Connor in there, or at least keeping it at a closer distance, because they gave so much time to the Aussie rider, and Primoz Roglic was not on his best form. Yes, he won the Vuelta a España, but you can look after multiple mountaintop summit finishes there at Spain, and Primoz Roglic was not that dominant. I'll give you about 2 stages where he was very dominant and was able to bring back some of that time on Ben O'Connor and put himself into the race leader's red jersey there to win his 4th title there of the Vuelta a España. So with that in mind, when you start looking at BORA Hansgrohe tactically, they have certainly had some bad tactics. And there's none bigger than going into the 25 Tour de France, where you look at the team around Primoz Roglic and Lipovic, And the tactic that they went into that year's Tour de France, this year's Tour de France that just finished, is that they never had the team strong enough to really back up and help Lipovets or help Primoz Roglic. Now, Roglic was down on form. He'd crashed at the Giro four different times, so he came into the Tour de France not at 100%. But even still, when you look at the team they brought, there was no real support for Lipovets. And it didn't come in the form of Primoz Roglic because the director sportifs there at BORA Hansgrohe allowed Primoz Roglic to stay up the road when Lipovets was back there chasing, and only at 30 seconds. I'll show you the picture again at the top of that summit of stage 18, and you can see over the right shoulder there of Lipovets that Primoz Roglic is in that front group, and we're talking about a 30-second, 25-second gap. Primoz Roglic drops back, grabs his teammate, they work together, they close the gap. Well, why do I bring that stage up? Well, later, after Primoz Roglic took his nature break and we saw the three riders go up the road of Ben O'Connor, of Rubio, and of Jorgensen, well, the next rider to go up the road was Lipovets. But the problem was Lipovets was going up the road solo, and the director sportif did not calculate at this year's Tour de France. That was this year's Tour de France, did not calculate that Lipovets had already done the climb before, the penultimate climb before, when Jonas and Tadej Pogačar are attacking up the road. He did that ascent in the wind on his own. He did the whole descent on his own. When he caught the group, he attacked the group, and now he was on his own again. So that's a lot of time solo. Later, when he blew up and almost lost the race leader's white jersey to Oscar only, held it by just 30 seconds. Of course, he performed better on stage 19 and then solid throughout the rest of the Tour de France, but he almost lost the race leader's white jersey because why? Because the director sportif did not realize that Lipovets and did not calculate that Lipovets was solo going up the penultimate climb, solo down the descent, and then, of course, tacking solo. Can he hold it and still climb up a 15, 20-kilometer climb at the finish of the stage? No, he couldn't. He blew up. Oscar only almost moved himself into a podium position at the 25 Tour de France. So tactically, when you look at the second problem there for the switch of Remco Evenepoel going over the BORA Hansgrohe, I don't think the director sportifs at Soudal Quickstep are any worse than they are over there at BORA Hansgrohe. They seem to be making about the same knucklehead tactics from both teams. So Remco Evenepoel has not gained anything there. So again, we look up at the problem, first page problem, can they play nice? We don't know the answer to that. We look at the second page problem, is the director sportif better over there at Soudal Quickstep than BORA Hansgrohe? I don't see that. But if we start looking at the third page problem, when we're talking about blow-ups, spectacular blow-ups, can you figure out over there at Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe, can they figure out why Remco Evenepoel had blown up so many times throughout this season? If we look at early part of the Classics, when he came in and he won Brabantse and he beat Wout van Aert, he was spectacular in Brabantse. His first race back of the 25 season, Remco Evenepoel was amazing. Then all of a sudden we get to Flèche Wallonne and we see a little dent, or maybe it was just a little bump. No one was quite sure. But we were 100% sure at Liège-Bastogne-Liège when Remco Evenepoel got dropped at La Redoute and couldn't do anything about it, and spectacularly dropped time everywhere at this year's edition of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. That was a magnificent blow-up. And the trainers over there at Soudal Quickstep did not recognize the problem there at Liège-Bastogne-Liège and still sent Remco Evenepoel to Tour of Romandy. Now, why am I bringing that up? Well, once you blow up spectacularly at a race like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, where we saw that from Remco, that was the time where Remco needed to back the throttle off. He needed to rest for 2 weeks. He did not need to go over to a small race called Romandy. Small. It is small when you compare it to the Tour de France and the other Grand Tours and the bigger one-week races. But it's not big enough for a rider that just blew up at Liège-Bastogne-Liège to send to Romandy when they should have backed him off. So we start looking at the problems that Remco Evenepoel's had of big-time blow-ups, and we only have to go into the Tour of Spain to see that again. When we're talking about Sepp Kuss winning in 2023, Remco Evenepoel blew up in that edition, and he's blown up spectacularly in a few other races too. But if we stay on the 23 Vuelta a España, Soudal Quickstep should have seen that blow up there and then should have recognized it happening there at Liège-Bastogne-Liège and said, hey, let's back the throttle off a little bit. But instead, by comparing the two, they thought, well, Remco Evenepoel still was able to recover at the Vuelta a España and win. But was he really able to recover 100%? Because his wins at that year's 23 Vuelta a España came from the breakaway later, did not come from going toe-to-toe with the Jumbo-Visma trifecta there of Sepp Kuss, Jonas Vingegaard, and Primož Roglič. All of his battles came with second and third page riders up the road in the breakaway. They did not come from beating the best riders at the Vuelta a España in 2023. So in 2025, when you look at Soudal Quickstep not recognizing that spectacular blow-up at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, you have to ask yourself when it comes to the trainers and the coaches over there at Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe, can they solve that issue? Do they know the problem there that Remco Evenepoel is having that caused those spectacular blow-ups all the way into Liège-Bastogne-Liège, into Dauphiné, and then into the 25 Tour de France? Can they solve that? So that's the next problem over there at Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe that they have to figure out, and hopefully they can, to make the racing better, because we need some more top-page riders that can battle against Tadej Pogačar. All right, with those problems already on the third page, let's go to the fourth page. The fourth page has to be crashes. Can Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe solve the issues of crashes of both Remco Evenepoel, but especially of Primož Roglič? If they can solve this, this is the fourth page problem. They have major problems over there at Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe. When you start looking at them and everyone's calling them a super team, they certainly can be, but they have to solve these first page problems that are existing, and the crashes for Primož Roglič is one of them. Again, we go into the 25 Tour de France, and you look at the whole first 10 stages of racing. BORA Hansgrohe is basically racing at the back of the peloton. You will not be able to do that and win Grand Tours. Now, they may have helped solve the little bit of that dilemma that we saw where they couldn't keep Primož Roglič at the front of the peloton at crucial moments to keep him out of danger, but they might have one little star signing. Now, it doesn't say for sure in the articles that I have read for sure if Matteo Cattaneo, the teammate of Remco Evenepoel, has for sure signed, but it says it looks like he's going to sign. And if that's the case, when Remco Evenepoel leaves Soudal Quickstep, the most important rider that he's taken with him is Matteo Cattaneo. If you look at Soudal Quickstep throughout the Grand Tour races and the week-long races, when you're talking Remco Evenepoel staying safe at the front of the peloton, Matteo Cattaneo is one of the riders that normally you see at the front of the peloton that's dragging Remco Evenepoel and keeping the Belgium kids safe. So what does that mean now when you take Remco Evenepoel and you take Cattaneo over there to the Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe? Well, throughout the Grand Tour races for the last 2 seasons for Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe, Primož Roglič has not been safe. You bring a rider like Cattaneo over there that knows how to keep his superstar rider in good position, all of a sudden that not only helps Remco Evenepoel, but will help Primož Roglič. So if BORA Hansgrohe know how to use Cattaneo correctly, which they really don't need to figure that out except for signing him. If they sign him, Cattaneo already knows how to do it. So the only problem they need to do is make sure they sign Cattaneo. But if they get Cattaneo over there, all of a sudden we might see that problem of both these riders crashing at bad times in the race, especially Primož Roglič. Maybe that number gets reduced a bit when you have a rider like Cattaneo signed over there. So they need to get Matteo Cattaneo signed up here, in my belief, on Beyond the Coverage. All right, it does look like a superstar-studded team. There's no doubt about that. What I would do if I am the director sportif and I sign Remco Evenepoel over here, first step, can they play nice? Get them to play nice. Send them to all the races and just say, hey, you guys are going to all the races together. I'm going to send you to all of them. But Remco Evenepoel, you are not the leader, and Primož Roglič, you are not the leader either. You guys are dual leadership here, and you have to play nice together. Because if these two can play nice together, we could see spectacular racing at every event that Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe go to. But if you separate the team, like we saw at the Giro d'Italia, where we had Jai Hindley at the Giro d'Italia, you had Danny Martinez at the Giro d'Italia, and then you look at the Tour de France, where honestly they were going there with 2 riders. I know they went with 3 when you look at Vlasov, how he should have performed, but Vlasov's form has always been a little hit and miss in the last 2 seasons here of the European peloton. So really you went there with Lipovic, who looked like he was on fine form after going 3rd at this year's Dauphiné, and then of course carried that form in the Tour de France, and then you were going with Primoz Roglic. Now, we know later Primoz Roglic wasn't climbing good in the mountains. We know Vlasov wasn't climbing good. But if you had brought over more climbers without separating the team, so you didn't have Jai Hindley and Danny Martinez, you would have backup riders that could help if there was a problem, like we see over at UAE Team Emirates, where they had lost Almeida early at the Tour de France, but they still had Jonathan Narvaez that was climbing in the front group. They still had Soler doing the early first climbs and staying with the front group when it was still reduced, versus when you look over at Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe, their numbers in the front group were depleted massively, where normally we only saw Primoz Roglic and Lipovitz in the front group of the 25 Tour de France. So they need to keep the team together. They have to have these guys gelling. And I'd send them to every race and say, you guys have to play nice. If you need any kind of realistic of looking at how to do it, look at the 2003 Saturn team, where we had to play nice. We had to always race together, and there was never any drama on the 2003 Saturn team on how we were going to share victories. And we had superstar-studded domestiques on that team too that won many times throughout the 2003 season. And I can remember leading out one Mark McCormick, who put himself in the U.S. Pro Stars and Stripes jersey at the Philadelphia race. And I can remember when Mark McCormick helping me out at the San Francisco Grand Prix, was doing some fantastic teamwork in the back while I was going solo up the road. So you have to play nice. That is the #1 first page problem that Remco Evenepoel and Primoz Roglic will have over at Red Bull BORA Hansgrohe. If they can solve that, the other issues I think you can work on, but spectacularly first page problem is certainly, can they play nice? Make sure you guys like and subscribe. If these two guys play nice together, we might see a superstar-studded team that can push Tadej Pogačar to the limit and make the Slovenian get interested in bike racing all over again if he really was falling asleep at the 25 Tour de France. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys at the next edition real soon.